One final question from me, and then we will turn to some of your questions. Apart from Peter James, apart from yourself, who are the writers, crime writers, you would most recommend the audience to also read? Who are the best crime writers for you, either contemporary or historical, either of you?
One of my biggest influences was Ed McBain, the American crime writer. He was a former cop himself who wrote the precinct stories in New York. In terms of modern crime writers, I like Michael Connelly. He's a crime reporter turned crime novelist, and he has an authenticity that I find is lacking in not all crime novels, but I love books that have that sense that the author really knows what they're talking about. That's what, to me, an understanding police culture wherever it is. And I think those are the reasons I like him so much in particular.
Peter?
Present company accepted. I haven't tended to read an awful lot of crime novels, to be honest. I quite liked James Ellroy, the American writer, and then I think he began to get into a very particular kind of stylistic approach. I like the work of David Peace, and we've had David down here, and again those sort of Yorkshire noir, and again there's a very edgy stylistic element to his writing. The Girl Who Kicked the Hornet's Nest, Stieg Larsson, I've quite enjoyed those, and I think they're kind of similar to yours. I think in a certain kind of edgy, pacey thrillers, lots of switches and changes. I've quite enjoyed those, and I have liked Jay Carnot's work. He's written 3: The Long Firm, True Crime, and He Kills Coppers, which I think, and they're all to some extent based upon on true stories, but I think he captures a moment very effectively.
But to me, I think the all-time greatest crime novel ever written was written by a non-crime writer, which was Graham Greene, and Brighton Rock, set in this city. It was the book that made me want to be a writer. But it's not just that. It has one of the most arresting opening lines. Within 30 minutes of arriving in Brighton, Hale knew they meant to murder him. You have to read on. But more than that, it was the first novel I ever read, and I haven't read that many since, crime novels, which really dealt with not just the crime and how it was solved. It was the inner lives of the villains and the victims. You had Pinky, one of the nastiest villains in fiction. Yet he's a Catholic and he's worried about what's going to happen to him, and will he get punished in the afterlife. A wonderfully multi-dimensional book.
So lots of recommendations there. Now we turn to you, and our first. Okay, our first question, and I'll read it out. But if the person involved subsequently wants to jump up and give a supplementary, that's fine. Is from Dave Farmer. Dave Farmer? Yes, hi Dave. So I'll read your question out, but if I get it wrong, you can. Are there? This is mostly for you, Peter, but I think it covers both. Are there moments when science and your experience of reality conflict with imagination and creativity, and if so, which yield? So balance between.
With science?
Well, I think it's probably. I don't know. Dave can amplify what he meant by that, maybe. But.
No, it's just about in the creative process, about where there are your knowledge of reality and experience and your desire to be creative and imaginative.
I try to make it authentic. I think that, obviously, things like forensics, DNA testing used to take weeks, if not months, to get a result. And trying to fit that into it. Luckily, that has now speeded up. I pushed it a little bit in Dead Like You to get a result in 48 hours rather than probably the 3 or 4 days, but I didn't feel that was being unfair on the audience. But I think as a writer, you should never cheat. You can't ever have a sort of deus ex machina. But I think, I tend to, if you like, make some shortcuts. The work of a senior investigating officer and his team is massively paperwork. driven. But I don't think anybody wants to read Roy Gray sitting in his office filling in forms for 500 pages. So I have him be proactive. I mean, he could be. It's not that often they would be, but I think with writing you have to take certain license to create a vibrant story.
I mean, can I ask Dave, I mean, from your point of view as a reader, would you prefer novels to take you more out into imagination, or is it actually more convincing if they do seem to be bounded in reality? Is that maybe one of the things that makes Peter's novels work?
Exactly so. It is that. It's that belief in reality and the conviction that what you're reading is absolutely based and seated in reality that I appreciate more. And that's what I really wanted to hear. So yes, I mean, I understand that answer perfectly, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Second question is from, just sort of on the same thing, but moves it along a different way, from Mike Street. Mike? Hi, Mike. Mike's question is, and I think this is probably one where both the Peters can offer a view, is he says, are the Roy Grace novels based on actual crimes that have taken place in Sussex? But I guess to broaden the question slightly is what's their analogy with actual crimes, whether in Sussex or elsewhere? I mean, where do you get that material from? How typical is it? What kind of pattern of crime are we recognising in the novels? Where do you get the material from?
The answer is no. They're not specifically crimes that happen in Sussex, although the second book in the Roy Gray series, Looking Good Dead, that started off 15 years ago when I got a phone call from a police surgeon who asked me if I would come with my movie maker's hat on and look at a piece of footage that Sussex police had seized in a raid. And it was a girl being stabbed to death, a teenage girl, naked, being stabbed to death. And he wanted to know if I thought that was a movie or if it was real. And I said, if it's a movie, she should win an Oscar. I said, what is this? He said, we think it's a snuff movie. And he said, there are people that will pay money to have footage of people actually being murdered. And that always fascinated me. And when I was thinking of the subject for the second Roy Grace novel, I thought that would be very interesting to write about and research. So to that extent, there's a kind of element that was an element of reality. But I mean, in Dead Tomorrow, which was the fifth book in the series, that came out of the reality that there really is a world trade in human organs. There isn't a clinic outside Brighton that I'm aware of. And Dead Like You, which is the last novel, out is drawn from a rape case that happened in Rotherham. So when I've adapted it to down here, and my new book, which is coming out in a couple of weeks' time, Dead Man's Grip, is, again, it's a fiction, but it kicks off with a bad car accident in Brighton, but it's not based on any accident that's happened.
Any thoughts on the patterns of actual crime that might lie or not lie behind the sort of thing Peter writes about? I mean,
we spoke earlier and on the radio earlier this week about the reality that underpins a lot of the stories that you have, the incidents, sexual murder, organ trafficking, snuff movies. And I think, yes, I mean, in crime all human life is there and all death. But one of the things I sometimes feel is that often the truth is even stranger than the fiction. And I refer to an interesting, I've not seen it written in a novel, but perhaps someone will have a go. It's in my area of interest about the use of converted weapons, converted guns in crime, used basically junk guns. They are like your starting pistol, and they are drilled out and they're made capable of firing a real bullet. But of course, they were never designed to fire a real bullet. And there have been a couple of incidents in London where the crime scene involved a dead body with a bullet hole in them and two severed fingers. as a result of the gun, which was never designed to fire a real bullet, blowing up in the hand of the guy who pulled the trigger, he has left them behind at the crime scene. Now, will we get that in a crime novel? It's that. I mean, that's a
consultancy.
If you saw that in a crime novel, you'd wonder whether that was true. But that, you know, those are true incidents.
You may have a rival here with Peter.